virus, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Good evening once again, folks, and welcome to Doctor on Call. This evening we have with us our same guest from the past 2 weeks, Dr. Sonia Nixon, and of course Mrs. Lydia Browne. We started our discussion looking at salt in our diet, then we went to sugar, and this evening we will be looking at fat in the diet. And of course, I guess we would get to find out quite a bit. In recent times, fat has been branded as something not good at all, but you may learn something a little different this evening. So it is a good time to welcome our guest, Mrs. Browne. It's a pleasure to have you back this week. I'm starting to feel that I need to bring you on every Tuesday. All right, it's really a pleasure to have you back this evening. We're happy, and of course, a member of our staff, Dr. Nixon. Doc, good evening.
Unpaid member of staff. Service for free.
All right.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Holy Week.
Yes, indeed. So we're talking fats and all that this week, and again, I'm going to start with Mrs. Browne this evening. Mrs. Browne, there was a time when, as children growing up, your parents wanted to see that child looking nice and fat and plump and all of that. If that wasn't the case, then the child probably had maljo or something like that, those kind of things. And as time went on, we got to realize, but wait, no, that is not the case. And then fat was branded as something no good. And then everybody started walking, and people wanted to come like, look like their finger. So we're going to talk about this evening, and fat. When we speak of fat, let's maybe start with a little science, and then we would break it down and look into all the aspects of what we refer to as fat.
Well, fat is actually is something that we get from our foods. It is actually a major source of energy for the body, and it is necessary for life. It helps in us to get some of the vitamins. There are vitamins A, D, E, and K that needs fat to be absorbed. It also helps in building our cell membranes. The interior of our cells. It protects our nerve cells. So it's not that we don't need any fat. We need the fat. It's important for all of those things mentioned. However, sometimes we get it in excess, and sometimes we don't eat sufficient of the fats that are really healthy, particularly heart healthy. And the reason why we focus on fats that are heart healthy is because we have a lot of heart disease or cardiovascular disease in Grenada, particularly, well, worldwide, but we're focusing on Grenada. And it is also one of the top causes of death among people in Grenada as well. So it's important for us to be able to differentiate. We're eating fats, yes, but what type of fat we actually consume.
Right. So I'm getting that there are different types of fat. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So we have Fats are categorized into different areas. We have saturated fats. We have unsaturated fats. The saturated fats are actually the fats that have been linked to heart disease. And it's not that there's no recommendation that you should have absolutely zero saturated fat in your diet, but that it should be limited in the diet because it contributes to heart disease. There's actually fat on its whole. There's no really an upper limit of fat that you should consume, but there is a guideline in terms of the nutrients that actually give us energy, which is a protein, carbohydrates, and fat. There's a certain distribution, and it's usually recommended that between 20 to 30% of the diet be fat. And of that fat, it's recommended that about 7% of fats be from saturated fat because, again, of the contribution it has towards cardiovascular or coronary artery disease. We get a lot of these saturated fats from a lot of our animal products. We also get saturated fats from animal products, meaning meat and dairy foods. And we also get it from a lot of our processed meats, particularly our processed meat that has a lot of saturated fat in it. And some of our prepackaged foods, like maybe cookies and chips, and even some of our pastries and so. These are things that we can get some saturated fat from. But in addition to saturated fat, there is also a fat known as trans fat. And the trans fat can happen naturally. It can naturally occur in animal products, but it can also be manufactured. So sometimes we will see things like margarines or other foods says zero trans fat, particularly margarine. You will see on the package it says zero trans fat. And the reason for that is because margarine is a vegetable oil, which is a polyunsaturated fat. Naturally, it's liquid at room temperature. So, but what has happened is that they add hydrogen atoms to these fats in order to make that liquid vegetable fat look more like a spread, like a butter, because butter is animal fat, and I know a lot of people sometimes don't distinguish that, but there's butter that is animal from an animal product, and there's margarine that's from a vegetable product. However, vegetable oil is naturally liquid, so margarine is not the natural form of vegetable fat. So that process of adding these hydrogen atoms there is called hydrogenation. And when we look at a food package and we look at the ingredient list, we will see hydrogenation, or sometimes we see partially hydrogenated fat. So the hydrogenated fat is actually more of a saturated fat, but the partially hydrogenated fat is more equivalent to that trans fat. And trans fat is also known to contribute towards heart disease and so. And then you have the healthier fats, which are your monounsaturated fats. And these fats have, chemically speaking, they have these double bonds, but one double bond. And then you have the polyunsaturated fats that have many double bonds, so that they don't have as much of those hydrogen atoms to them. And the monounsaturated fats we get from things like olive oil, canola oil is known to have it, avocado, our local pear has a good source of monounsaturated fatty acids. The polyunsaturated fats we get from a lot of our vegetable oils, and with things like corn oil and soybean oil and safflower oil and things canola. Like that. The local, excuse me?
Canola.
Canola, yes, the canola oil I mentioned has more of the monounsaturated fat, but the polyunsaturated fats is more your corn oil, your other vegetable oils, and so. And those aren't bad oils, but then the polyunsaturated fats, which is those local vegetable oils, and so are broken down further into a different sector of fats, which is your omega-3s, and a lot of people would have heard of omega-3s and omega-6s. So we try to balance that in the diet as well, so that you're having more omega-3s than omega-6s. Most of us get more of the omega-6s than we do the omega-3s. And omega-3s you will get from your fatty fish like tuna and herring and mackerel, sardines, the flax seeds. These are placed in walnuts. We don't have walnuts, aren't really very popular in Grenada, and it's pretty costly. But those are also a good source. And we also get it from some of our seaweeds, and so we were able to get those because those are heart healthy, and it actually protects our hearts and protects us from a lot of inflammation and things like that in the body. So the fat is broken up into fat seems even more complicated than the salt and the sugars that we discussed earlier. But as persons acquaint themselves a little more with looking at the different types of fats, they will know how to best choose and to make sure that they're getting healthy sources in their diet.
Right. I understand that, but I want to go back a bit. So saturated fat, unsaturated fat, trans fats. And we understand where the sources we can get them from. But what really are they? When we speak of saturated fat, what does that mean? And if we consume that, what will it do for us? Or what will it do to us?
Okay. The saturated fat, actually fats are made up of is a carbon, hydrogen, oxygen chain of these different atoms that make up the fat. Now, sometimes there are double bonds between like the carbon atoms, but there are also hydrogen atoms attached. So when you have a saturated fat, you don't have the double bonds, you have a lot of hydrogen bonds, which makes that fat a little more unhealthy to the diet. It can contribute to things like cholesterol levels going up, clogging of arteries and things like that, the saturated fat. But we still need it because it's important for certain vital functions in the body for some of our cells, and so we need to have some of it. So we can't absolute it out of the diet, but we need to be able to minimize it in the diet. The trans fat has the same type of effect in terms of affecting the cholesterol, and so hardening the arteries, and so when you have your arteries hardened or your arteries thickened, it's a little harder for blood flow to get through these veins or
the vessels,
arteries.
Yes.
Arteries, right. So in this way, and when the cholesterol level goes up, it may lodge, depending on the type of cholesterol, because of the type of fats that you take in. You may have areas in your arteries where cholesterol may tend to settle and then get calcified, because calcium would come over that, forming a hardened, what we call plaque, which can lead to things like heart attacks and strokes. And Dr. Nixon could probably explain that a little better than I can.
Right, wonderful, Doc. So we're coming to you. The saturated, unsaturated, trans fats, and we're gonna go down to the other fats, just like the mono and the poly, and so. Animal fats as compared to plant fats, so to speak, or vegetable fat. Which of those are better for human consumption, and why?
I can say the funny things, but no, there have been lots of research, right, that has showed us that animal fat, especially in excess, is going to cause us to have challenges. That's just the bottom line. All right. Not only from clogging of our arteries, but also from making us fat, making us put on weight, right? As a result of which we can become obese, right? Granted, the carbohydrates are going to do that, but the fats will break down into simpler compounds and change back and store as fat in the original fat cells. You're not getting any more cells, you're just getting more and more fat just jamming into those cells. So the nice slim cell that you normally have for coverage and for aesthetics and protection and warmth and storage for energy when things get bad, start to look bulky. That is why sometimes, that is why when people put on a lot of weight, they look so unpleasant because these cells just absorb it. No, not necessarily any aesthetic advantage. They just get big. We also know that those being obese, being overweight and obese, does put you at greater risk for developing those diseases like hypertension and diabetes and cancer, and even more so for making management, caring, taking care and controlling those diseases is even more difficult when you have a lot of fat on board. In the case of diabetes, for example, it is claimed that that fat that you store actually produces toxins that lead to the challenges that diabetes bring, that you have diabetes at all. So the animal fat certainly. And Mrs. Browne said it clearly, you know, everything in balance. If you use too much non-animal fat, plant fat, you're gonna put on weight just as well. But we have the added disadvantage and more quickly of having challenges with the arteries and all things. Apart from that, the animal fat causes a lot of inflammation along the walls of the blood vessels, right? Makes it swollen and irritated. So it's no longer smooth. So if you have, it's like having crevices in the road, potholes will take on dirt and more dirt and bigger dirt, and eventually a pothole might become a mound if there's water that washes it off. But the point is that mound at some stage will break because there's so much instability caused by all the inflammation in the lining of the blood vessels, especially the smaller vessels.
Right. I'm just sticking with the functions and benefits of having fat in your diet, and I'm going to ask a little bit in a little while about quantities, but fat and brain function. Is there any connection there? Can fat actually help with brain function?
And yes, it's known, and I want to put a plug for the guys, because also in the development of spermatozoid, sperm cells, it's important. So, and this is what I said again in the beginning, that we do need to have some. So if you look at if you get your blood study, it gives you a limit, right? It's not 0, and it's not 99. It's between X and Y, you know, and because those components have functions in yourself, certainly in your brain. When children have malnutrition, for example, the first thing the body consumes is the fat, right? And you can have damage to the brain as a result of, because if you look for the fat wherever it is, it consumes the fat, consumes the muscles, and you will have brain damage. The truth is you do need to have a certain amount of fat to ensure that your brain function, I guess, we want to say oil your brain, but you kind of need to have, it's for the integrity, for the strength and the stability of your brain cells. That's very important.
Right. What about regulation of hormones and genes and all of that?
What kind of genes? I'm teasing. sorry.
Don't worry.
I'm gonna ask you, I don't even know the brand of genes that we have in here. But seriously. But look, and maybe Mrs. Browne is better as a nutritionist to tell you this, because I look at the bigger problems and problems. Your genetics, I guess, your body's components is something that's already encoded. Okay, so you can't, you shouldn't change that. But your hormonal function, everything you do need to have a certain amount of fat, is not just there so that your boyfriend can hug you around a nice soft waist or bottom, right? And that's good too, okay? Because it does add to the aesthetic, especially in a female body, right? Our breasts consist of mostly fatty tissue, right? Our hips or bottom. That's as we change, we would put on fat in places that characterize us as females. What our problem is are you taking too much in your diet that's going to make you sick?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you have a balanced diet, if you give your kids milk, for example, you're not giving them the whole cow, you're giving them a glass of milk a day, right? There's fat in the milk, right? And that is why we tell our parents, for example, you remember when they used to give the skim milk? I don't know if you used to go to school in them days, but
yeah, PRA milk.
No, it's not
that's what we used to call it.
In the days of PRA, I don't have to drink milk anymore.
Well, that's how I know we used to call it PRA milk.
No, but it was before that.
That's before PRA.
That's before.
No,
okay.
And they will get skimmed milk.
Mm-hmm.
Means that the fat is skimmed off at the top. But you had to add butter. You remember, Lydia? Parents had to add butter or a special oily compound back into the milk so that the children got the fat that was necessary for their brains to function and for the rest of their bodies to function, right? So I see people give their children low-fat eggs and low-fat. That's wrong, actually.
Let me just mention here that fat is so very important, because if we go back to infancy, we advocate for parents, for mothers to breastfeed their infant.
Mm-hmm.
And breast milk is very high in fat. Breast milk is very high in fat because fat is important for the energy, for the development of the developmental stages then of the body, so that the child can flourish well. Right? So it's not that we don't need it, but we need it in moderation, and we need to focus on the types of fats that we actually consume. Now, in terms of getting us fat or allowing us to gain weight, it's not just that. Years ago, we thought that if people ate fat, and hence the reason that we have a lot of low-fat products on the market. Right? So people go low fat because, I don't want to gain weight, so I'm eating everything low fat. But a lot of the low fat products have added other things to it in order to get back the taste that has been removed with the fat. Hence, sugar is added to a lot of things. So it's important for us to look at what we eat and whether we really need to go low fat or whether we just need to use the food in its natural form and just have it in moderation.
Okay. I understand that. Right. Let's take the break, because I want us to speak about quantities. So let's take the break first, and when we come back, we would go into what is required as it relates to fat. So stay with us, folks. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Broadcasting from the top of
Pharmacy offers both wholesale and retail pharmaceutical and over-the-counter products. We have the most competitive and affordable prices. We are the agents for Vic Plus multivitamin for healthy everyday lifestyle and Synatogen powder. Hills and Valley Pharmacy supplies the best quality, name brand clinical products such as Rescue Oil, Bio Oil, Neutrogena, Aveeno, and Claritin. We offer the most convenient opening hours. Our telephone numbers are 435-6904 or 6903. Remember, at Hills and Valley Pharmacy, your health is our business. We care.
Now open, Hills and Valley Medicare Center, your one-stop for medical supplies, massage therapy, physiotherapy, and an in-house physician. At Hills and Valley, your health is our business.
Back in 2018, I ran into some conflict with the law, which led me to being in a rehabilitation center. While I was there in the beginning, I thought all hope was lost. But then I found myself being engaged in a lot of rehabilitation programs and skill-based activities. making better use of my time, and then I started getting back some hope and began moving forward. Before I got into the rehabilitation center, I had some issues. I used to pray for something better in my life, and something better has come. Maybe not in the best way expected, but my life has changed for the better. In the rehabilitation center, I learned a lot of things that I use in my life today, like barbering and business skills. Today I am looking forward to being an independent barber, using my business skills while I continue to do skills training. We all deserve a chance for change.
Give our children a chance for change through diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration. This message is brought to you by the USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project 2, funded by the United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to oecs.org/JJRP.
We support you at every stage of your life.
For business,
For your education,
for your financial freedom,
for that new ride.
Upgrade your life with the Communal. Contact us today.
There's no better way to start your day than with me on Good Morning Grenada. Covering everything you need to start your mornings off right. 6:35 a.m. on weekdays on all GBN platforms. Good Morning Grenada, adding a little blossom to your mornings.
We represent 4/7 straight.
Welcome back. It's Doctor and Call, and we're discussing, for those of you who probably just joined us, fats in our diet. Mrs. Lydia Browne is with us, also Dr. Sonia Nixon. Before the break, we mentioned the issue of how much fat is healthy. So, Mrs. Browne, back to you. Let's talk about how much fat is needed, because on the weekend the guys, we would stop by one of the barbecue guys and get our portion of whatever it is, pork or tail or whatever it is, and we have a really good time with that.
Or the barbecue tail?
Yeah, the barbecue tails and whatever it is. We love the pork. And some guys, some people, they really dig into that piece of fat just before the meat. It scares me, but some people love it. So let's talk about
guys,
what is required.
Maybe those guys going jogging in the morning, okay? because it's energy dense. Remember that, right? 1 gram of fat has twice the amount of calories as a gram of carbohydrate. 1 gram of fat.
Okay.
So people these days who've been doing all these fancy diets that are just fat. So they live off that. When it breaks down, the component that it breaks down into suppresses the appetite, blah, blah, blah. It feeds the brain, etc., etc. But that's for another program. But if those guys going jogging in the morning and burning up is a different story. If not, or using a sledgehammer or a compressor, that's a different story.
So let's talk about how much fat is needed in our diet.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it's recommended that you have about 20 to 35% of your diet as fat. So let's suppose you're on a 2,000, if you're supposed to take in about 2,000 calories, 35% would probably run you about a little over 700 calories. And that will break down to maybe about 78 or so grams of fat per day. Now, for a man, 2,000 calories, or a young man, even in, well, not a young man, maybe someone even in their 40s or 30s or so, 40s, let's say, may be able to eat 2,000 calories, and that's fine. For a female who is in her 50s, 2,000 calories, unless she's significantly active, 2,000 calories is a bit much.
Okay.
So she probably needs closer to average size person, closer to maybe about 1,500, maybe even between 13 to 1,500, I would say. If she's just, normal person, not doing any steps at gymming and running and, and that type of thing, in order to maintain, that's in regards to weight, right? But again, even if you're taking in about 78 grams of fat per day in order to meet your caloric needs, we still go back to the type of fat that you're eating. So I learned something tonight. I didn't know that they were barbecuing pork tails.
You did not know that?
No, I didn't know that is something that was being done, so I listened that tonight.
But Mrs. Browne, you're missing in action. You're missing in action.
Yeah, I guess I have to start going around and seeing what's on the barbecue grills, but it's not something that I really favor. So, I really didn't realize that besides the salt that we spoke about earlier, what kind of pigtails? Is fresh pigtails or
yes, frozen tails?
Pigtails. Okay, all right, frozen pigtails. But in general, I know that over the years, having worked in Grenada going back to 2004, I've often encountered people men in particular, and I'm not picking on the men, but this is what my experience has been. That when you talk to them about fat in their diet, particularly persons who have heart disease and so on, they need to make some moderation. And you mentioned pork, they will tell you, well, miss, it's not pork if I ain't get to eat the fat.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
I've heard that, so I'm speaking truth.
It is true.
Yes, I hear that over and over. I hear it very often over the years. So telling people to trim fat and so is not a thing. I know, like in Spanish cultures, they actually use the pork skins with all that fat and they would heat it. And this is what, in some Spanish cultures, they would fry like the plantains and things like that from that pork fat. I'm not sure that we do that here. I know people would have done that over the years from need, not having, Mm-hmm. I know my mom, for instance, would have used the chicken fat when she didn't have.
Yes.
Would heat it so that she can get the oil from it, the grease from it.
Yes.
Right? But in saying that, my mom died from heart disease.
Oh.
So how would that have contributed? She was not a big, any extreme large size person, but She had to have heart surgery, quadruple bypass at that, which means four valves they're going into. And she subsequently, succumbed to the heart disease. And I look at things like that and I said, my God, maybe God saved us by allowing us to move on so that we could have probably done a little bit better for ourselves. And so we didn't have to revert to doing things like that. Do we have people here that are still doing that? I mean, besides the barbecue, the chicken skin, even if we clean chicken, the chicken skin, under the chicken skin, you can remove the skin. That would remove some of the fat, but there's always fat that you're not going to be able to visibly see. So there's still fat there. And we may very well consume it, but at least if we know we make an effort to trim and to do, what we can prior to cooking, we would have at least reduced the amount of that saturated fat. Because when you thaw chicken, the fat is not running down the sink. If you arrest it in a bowl and you put it there, you come in to wash it and to clean it, the fat is sitting there looking at you, right? So then that is a saturated fat. That is a saturated fat. In terms of the pigtails and so on, I just have to say, fellas, try and go light on these things because, it may be tasty now and I don't want to step in on anybody's profits. But we have to look out for ourselves in terms of what we choosing to buy and how frequently we choosing to buy.
Great.
I listened to Lydia speak about her mother, and you see, the research is showing us that the higher your cholesterol, there's a linear relationship. So the higher your cholesterol, the higher your chances of having arteriosclerosis, arteries having hardened, sclerotic, hard patches along the walls of the blood vessels. Those smaller and even the bigger blood vessels. You have them in your carotid, the big vessel in your neck, right, which can loosen and cause you to have strokes. So the higher cholesterol, and we know that that kind of fat that produces cholesterol exists in the animal fat that we consume. And so later we probably can start looking. I'll tell you what I've seen though in my practice. I have seen, and granted this is a relatively new experience for me, but I have seen a lot of people with elevated cholesterols. Total cholesterol, and not necessarily fat people, I can tell you. But I do routine cholesterol profile or something, and I've seen a lot of people with elevated cholesterols and elevated bad cholesterol. It means that we're eating a lot of meat. And Mrs. Browne mentioned that, you can take off all the skin. That's why I tell you, still grill the chicken, because when you grill it, half of the fat is inside the muscle. The other thing is that a lot of the chicken that we consume, that imported chicken, those pounds and pounds of fat that make up the weight, might be cheaper, but it's not as healthy. And we do consume a lot of fat from that. And when we eat fat, that's fat nice, sweet. It makes the food smooth and gives it that really gourmet flavor. Fat makes the food taste nice. It is therefore important that people are aware of the dangers of consuming too much of it. Because as Mrs. Browne said, we don't have to not eat fat. In fact, we need it. In fact, we do need fat in our diet. What we need is to have only what we need and not more.
Right. So, Mrs. Browne, I'm having my lunch on Sunday, and I have some carbs there. I have some vegetables, and of course my meat. If we were to break it down in terms of, let's say, ounces, which most people understand better, how much meat, and I'm making reference to meat because we're talking fats. How much meat should I have on that plate so that one, I get the adequate amount of fat that I require to keep me healthy?
Well, if you're just technically looking at the meat to give you fat. So if you have about 78 grams of fat to eat, that's for the day in your 2,000 calorie diet. Now, we say about 78 grams, and we're talking about 28 grams, about an ounce. So we're saying maybe about 3 and some ounces. Let's make it just 4 ounces of meat for that meal. But what did you have for breakfast? Did you have eggs?
Yes.
And what are you going to have for dinner?
Maybe some salad or something.
No, hopefully salad or something, because you've already exhausted your meat for the day. But the thing is that we eat, that's just a recommended amount as to how much, where we should keep that fat, right, for the day. So if you're looking to add, you have to look at what you're having for the entire day. It's a little difficult for me here without a calculator, because I'm calculator driven. I'm not mental arithmetic.
Right. So let's say we have 78 grams of meat. We're talking here about just about 2.5 ounces of meat.
Right. So an ounce of meat is probably gonna have, depending on the type of meat too, because you have your medium fat meat like your chicken, and so you have your very high fat meat, which would be your piece of pork with the fat surrounding it. So if you have the piece of meat with your fat surrounding it, you probably have about 8 grams of fat per ounce on average.
Right. And you're saying that for the day we need about what? How many grams of fat? About 30 grams?
This is percentage, huh? This is percentage. This is what I'm saying. Because the 2,000 calorie diet, you need about between 20 to 35.
Right.
So if you go at 35, you're going to fall at about 78 grams.
78 grams. Okay.
Somewhere around there. Between 30 35, you're probably 78 to maybe about 85, 86, somewhere around.
Okay. And that's per day?
That's for the day.
For the day. Right. So basically we're talking about, let's say, 3 ounces of fat per day?
No.
Well, help me out here. I want to get it and that our people understand. So we're saying I'm talking about what I want to get in how much ounces of fat we may need per day in our diet.
Okay, let me.
Because I have the calculator in front of me here. I'll calculate it right away.
Right, so 78 and divided by 28.
So 78 grams. And we're dividing that by, you said 28?
25. That's 3 ounces.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
That's what I figured. Is about 3 ounces.
Yes. Right. So we need 3 ounces of fat per day. You know that.
That's for the person who is on that 2,000 calorie diet.
Okay.
That is having 35 to 35%.
And that is
somebody else may not need to have 35%. They may need to have 30, or they may need to have 25, depending on what's going on with them.
Okay.
And this is why diet meal planning, and when people say, "Oh, I want a meal plan," is very individual.
Okay. Wonderful.
Very individual. You don't just make a meal plan and hand it out to everybody on the street.
Okay. Wonderful. Because we also get what are some of the other foods that we can get our fat from? So let's just talk about, let's say Dr. Nixon is a vegetarian. Would she get the necessary amount of fats that she require from just using vegetables? Or no meat diet?
The amount of fat?
Yeah.
No, not from vegetables.
Okay.
Not from vegetables. You have to include other sources, yes. When she eats some nuts.
Right,
When she eats some avocado. You see, she can use some vegetable oils on her food.
Right, okay.
She can eat piece of coconut.
Okay.
All of that is giving her the fats that she needs.
Right. Okay. So you don't necessarily need the animal fat. You can get it from other sources and keep you
Absolutely. You can get it from other sources. And when a lot of times people get scared when they hear cholesterol and they think about fat, and again go back to the type of fat. But we have to bear in mind that cholesterol only comes from animal-based foods.
Okay, wonderful.
Plant-based foods do not have cholesterol. So sometimes people are afraid to eat some nuts because it has cholesterol. It doesn't have cholesterol. There may be a bit of saturated fat in there, but they would have more of the healthier fats than would the saturated fats.
Okay, fantastic.
Or people are afraid to eat avocado. I've had people come to me and tell me that people have told them don't eat avocado because it's going to raise their cholesterol. No, it's not, because we advocate for people to use olive oil, which is not something that we don't grow olives here.
Right.
But we grow avocado here, and it's the same type of fats.
Right.
So if we're saying that olive oil is a healthy fat, then so is avocado. And I keep advocating on many of these programs for somebody, I know it could be costly, but for somebody to start making avocado oil. It's tasty. It doesn't have a very pungent smell. It takes heat well, but of course it's going to take a lot of putting into a lot of resources to actually get the amount of oil that you know.
Right.
Just like coconut oil, you think coconut oil is expensive. Avocado oil is going to be relatively expensive as well, but it's something that we have here.
Right, lovely. I'm glad you mentioned coconut oil, because I was going to come to that next. In terms, we've had a number of stories about coconut oil. There was once when we heard that coconut oil, we should stay away from it. Then in recent times we're hearing that coconut oil is very good. Now I recall as a young fella growing up by my grandmother, we used coconut oil for everything. We use coconut oil in our food. When we bathe, we have to use coconut oil to grease our skin. We put it in our hair, everything, So now you're hearing that coconut oil is very good. The fats from coconut oil, as compared to, let's say, nuts or the same avocado, any difference there? Is there something that is probably better in coconut oil than in the other vegetables?
Look, I can say that there's something better. Now, just as we spoke a little earlier and say that we should be avoiding saturated fats, coconut oil is predominantly a saturated fat. I was looking at something a little while ago from Harvard University. They were saying, well, the American Heart Association advised us to cut back on saturated fat, and coconut oil is a saturated fat. But I've also done some research in the past and looked at coconut oil as a saturated fat and as a plant-based saturated fat. Coconut oil there are different lengths of fatty acids. So you have short chain, long chain, medium chains. Coconut oil has some, to the saturated fat, it also has some what they call medium chain triglycerides, which the body tends to utilize readily, as opposed to storing. The longer chain ones, the body may tend to store it. But the medium chain fatty acids, the body tends to use it for energy readily. When I went to school, they told me that any fat that sits at room temperature, any slight drop in room temperature and it clogs, it's a saturated fat. It's bad for the heart.
Okay.
So for many, many years, I wouldn't touch coconut oil. I may use a little coconut milk, but not to any significant level. I think that I think the translation comes in the fact that when we were younger and our parents used a lot of coconut milk and things like that, it was to flavor the food. We didn't have the amount of meat that we are having now. So some people which the typical day is a Sunday. For some it may be Saturday, but the typical day for the average person nowadays is a Sunday that they make their big meal. Or for some it might be end of month that they make their big meal. They can't just have chicken on the plate. It has to be chicken and something else. Piece of pork, piece of beef. When our foreparents were alive, they weren't using all this meat. So you had rice and peas, and you had some coconut milk in it.
Yes.
And that gave you flavor because the piece of meat was really so small. You know? But when we're eating all the animal fat, and this is just my interpretation, I don't have any research to back this, but when we were eating all the animal fat and then we add in the coconut fat on top of it, of course, we're less active than our foreparents.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we're going to see ill effects.
Right.
Personally, I use some coconut oil. I don't only use coconut oil. And I'm going to be honest, I don't only use coconut oil. I do use a bit of olive oil, depending on what I'm doing. And I do use a bit of avocado oil, depending on what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those are the three main oils that I use. But right now, if I look in my pantry, I have all three.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not everybody is able to have all three.
Right.
And of course, the ones that are very expensive, I use it very sparingly. So I would have it for more than 3/4 of the year. I'm still using it sparingly.
Right.
But even coconut oil is relatively expensive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some people may have to use a regular vegetable oil, and that's fine. You know, but if you have to use a little bit of coconut, I personally would not say don't. When it's something that we have, a lot of people have coconut trees, and some people can make their own coconut oil and have a little oil to use. I wouldn't say no.
Right. Now, you earlier we mentioned margarine. All right. Because of the additives, because we did say that vegetable oil is liquid, but of course you have some additives to get the margarine to be a spread and all of that. So it is a saturated fat. Compared to, or am I wrong here?
No, this is hydrogenation. Well, the hydrogenation process actually is hydrogenation could be equated to saturated fat.
Right. Okay. Right. So let's do a comparison. So margarine, which has additives, as compared, let's say, to butter, which is straight animal fat. Which is the better choice for consumption?
You know, I would like to think it depends on. Let me qualify margarine. There's margarine that comes as a stick, if you remember the way we used to have Blue Band margarine back in the day. Now it's in a tub, so it's relatively soft. So, and you will see that the package would tell you 0 trans fat. Because they have made it now, instead of making it into that hard stick, they've now made it softer, which means it's not as, if you want to say, saturated as the one that's in the stick. Right? So, but for persons who use, well, we shouldn't be using a lot anyway, but if somebody is just putting something on a piece of toast, slightly putting on a piece of toast, and they want to use regular butter, I would say they can use the regular butter.
Okay.
If you're using a tremendous amount of that type of thing, like some people put it on their bread like it's cheese, well, I would say maybe you can chance it with using the margarine, but it still would not be a healthy thing to do.
So is it a case where the softer the better?
Yes, it's a little healthier than the harder one. That's what I'm.
Okay, so then would it be correct to say that butter is healthier than margarine?
Well, if you're looking at it from a natural standpoint, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Great. So let me come to Doc now. Doc, you've been out of action for a little bit. I want us now we know that fat does have some ill effects. Let's talk about some of the medical conditions that can result from the excessive use of fat in our diet.
to them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We kind of mentioned some of the situations in the beginning. Hypertension, diabetes, and subsequently heart disease. We eventually have strokes, and we have all simply because of that little plaque, that little hardening that we get in inside of the, I'm going to say the arteries, because that's the ones that cause a challenge. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I keep seeing more and more people with elevated cholesterols. So cholesterol is what causes these hard plaques, like a scab, but inside of the wall. And they'll grow and they'll grow and they'll grow, right? And then one day, one of them loosens and you get a stroke. Because this little hardened fat ball, like when you cut an old pipe from your sink and you see all of that clogging. Yes. Mm-hmm. Old PVC pipes.
Those build up inside there. Yes.
There's build up, and that's fat. A lot of time
grease, is yes.
Grease that you throw on the sink. So imagine you have that going on in your blood vessels. I'm sorry, my dogs are having fun. I'm sorry. You become very wary of having those conditions because maybe one day one of these things will just loosen and go to your brain or go to your to a vessel in your heart and cause that it clogs so there's no oxygen beyond and you have a stroke or you have a heart attack. But also in the case of your heart, for example, Lydia mentioned her mother having quadruple bypass. It means that 4 of the major arteries in her heart were blocked and obviously blocked significantly. Mm-hmm. The truth is that by the time you're 3 years old, you can start developing arteriosclerosis. So think if you're giving your child barbecue pigtail every weekend, I hope you're not.
No.
Right? So if you're giving your child too much of foods that have trans fats, which should actually be banned, they're not supposed to be selling food unless they have 0 trans fat. That's already something that's established internationally. If you see it in the store, here it's because they're dumping it. Okay? And you're giving your child a lot of the foods that you give them, you give a lot of cheese and you give a lot of tinned foods. You tell me you had eggs for breakfast, that's what you said to Mrs. Browne, but that's not true. You had sausages. Mm-hmm. Right? 3, 4 chicken franks. A lot of it is just ground up fat, animal fat. And I said, fat, it's sweet, it tastes nice, it's smooth. Okay, people like it. So we give our children those things and we think that's what we need to give them. Because when I was young, my mother couldn't afford that, right, Lydia?
Exactly.
Right? And all of us in our age group grew up with a frying with chicken fat. Maybe we got away because we were a little active. Maybe. Because we know also that physical activity, is one of the main instruments in bringing down that cholesterol, the fats in your body. You tell your patient to start walking, getting active, and even before they start to lose weight visibly, the cholesterol comes down. But also remember that even with the cholesterol coming down, in the blood, you have these old plaques that are going to take a longer time to get rid of. Right? And I was talking about what Mrs. Browne said about her mom. When you have these plaques, often when you change that pipe, it's because water is not coming or is not going out properly. Am I right? Mm-hmm. The pipe in your house. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in the same way, if you clog up the pipes in your body with all that fat, you're not going to have sufficient oxygen going to your heart in particular. And I'll tell you what happens. How do you get a heart attack? You get a heart attack because there's a need for a whole lot of oxygen, your heart have a big job to do, even if it's a relatively big job. but it doesn't have enough blood flowing to it to give the oxygen that's necessary for those muscles to contract. And so it dies because there's this lack of oxygen in the muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to make sure that we eat, like Mrs. Browne says, sufficiently so we don't have surplus. If you're going to eat it, you have to burn it. Right? And if it's high, you're going to have to find a way to turn it back. What do? You change your diet. Maybe you really have to get off the fat for a little while so that your body doesn't have all of that. But you have to exercise. And then there are foods that help us to break down cholesterol, of course, and there are foods that help you to enhance your good cholesterol, because you do have protective cholesterol, okay, the HDL. The L one, the light one, is the bad one, okay? Right? And then there's always medications, which is probably a whole nother subject. But sometimes we do, because if I saw your cholesterol was 300, you're supposed to be a maximum of 200, right? 120 to 200. Even when I see you at 198, I'm concerned, because it's probably moving up from 120. Okay? Even if it's not at the top, I'm concerned. And I would ask you to change your lifestyle from then. But we worry about the people, because I'm seeing people with 280, 300 and change, and they're not old. And it may mean that you have to start them on medications together with the diet and the exercise to try and reverse what's there quickly, right? Because you have to work hard at reversing that to avoid all of these accidents that we see happening. And we also know that the mechanics caused by having diabetes and hypertension in particular also enhance, because it makes the wall, the inner surface of the blood vessel, it makes it unstable and gives provides an opportunity for the cholesterol to go under there and nestle. I don't mean to just nest itself like a bird, get really comfortable, right? So those are the things that we're really concerned about. Yes, because we need it, but we don't need a surplus. We don't need the surplus of the animal fats that we consume that make us have high cholesterol, that's going to make us develop disease, and then this disease turn back and make the wall bad, and make the walls bad, and still predispose us for bigger and more catastrophic events.
Very good. Mrs. Browne, trans fats. What are some of the foods, maybe common ones? Maybe people, you go to the supermarket and you there are things you like, so you pick it up and you buy it, and you really don't pay attention, because many of us, we don't take time off to read, so we miss important things along the way. What are some of the foods that contains trans fats that we should avoid? Just a few of them.
Well, because so many changes have taken place, I know in the United States, and so trans fat has been banned, and it's coming down the line. So we may see less and less foods having trans fat in it, because they recognize the detrimental effect that trans fat can. But you will get some natural occurring trans fat in animal foods.
Animal foods, okay.
Yeah, your meat and so will have some. So it's not that we're not going to get any trans fats in our diet. What we don't want is the ones that are manufactured. So which means the ones that are put into foods that are packaged.
And therefore, that's the reason why we have to read our food packages.
Exactly.
In the Caribbean, we don't have any rules that we don't have laws, at least certainly not in Grenada. There are no laws that say that we must have packaging. And if you read the back labels, the nutritional labels on the packages in the back, and we remember we're a society of imported foods. Most of what we buy is manufactured, but we don't have a manufacturing sector here per se, unless you're making time ball and fudge and those kind of things, right? And fresh fruits and vegetables, and that you just said you package them and sell them in the supermarket. But when it comes to developing foods, and especially like meats and stuff, right? There's no law here that says that you have to have labeling at the back of the package. But we still ask people to get accustomed to reading the back of the package. So what you may see, because trans fat always tell you less than 1%, because that is what is allowed. Okay? Less than 1% of the required daily amount of foods. So you have to look. So if you see something that have 2% and 3%, you need to dash that way, because it can be sold outside and they're ready, and they will dump where there are no rules, right? Manufacturers overseas have products that they want to get rid of. They're not going to change it because rules say you can't eat it in their country. They will find a community that will buy it cheap, and at least they can make back their investment. So we have to be very careful. Read the back of those labels. You look for the sugar, you look for the salt,
high sodium, yes,
and you look for the trans fats. Okay.
Well, as a matter of fact, let me just mention something on the labeling. Now, when a product has 0.5 grams or less of trans fat, it's okay for the company to put no trans fat. But when you look at the back of the label, you will see they will have grams for each of the nutrients listed there, and then they will have percentages. But on the trans fat, there's no percentage.
Okay.
Written on the nutrition label.
Right.
It will say the number of grams. So you want that number of grams to be 0 as often as is possible.
Yes.
The reason that there's no percent is because trans fat doesn't really have a place in the diet. So there's no percentage to tell you that you should have 5. We say 5. The last time we talked about sodium, I said 5% is low, 20% is high. That doesn't work for trans fat. It's just the number of grams that's there. Yes. And then you look for foods that have 0% as often as is possible.
0% trans fat.
Trans fat.
Okay, fantastic.
No, 0 grams.
0 grams, sorry, yes.
0 grams. 0 grams.
Because you won't see percentage. You won't see any percentage.
You wouldn't see a percentage. But on the saturated fat, you will see grams and you will see percentage. So the same rule will apply for the sodium, will apply for the saturated fat. 5% unless it's low, 20% or more is high.
Right. I just want to quickly go back. Monosaturated as compared to monounsaturated as compared to polyunsaturated. I'm getting it. Mono means 1, poly means more than 1.
Right.
And I'm seeing here, for example, you get your monounsaturated from olive oil, olives, nuts, things like that, avocados, and pork and beef. I noticed.
Pork and beef?
Yes, pork and beef is on the list.
Yes, you will get some monounsaturated fat, but if you're looking to increase the monounsaturated fats in your diet, pork and beef is not going to be your source to do that.
Right.
Because there's also going to be a good bit of saturated fat. And there are at least more saturated fat than you would get monounsaturated fat. So if you're looking for the monounsaturated fats, you're looking at your avocados, you're looking at your nuts. And if you just go to the supermarket and look at a can of nuts and you look at the label, you will see it has saturated fat, it has polyunsaturated fat, it has monounsaturated fats, but I can guarantee you that the monounsaturated fats is the highest number.
Right. Now your polyunsaturated, I'm seeing a list here of mainly seafood: salmon, sardines, herring, mackerel, anchovies. Then there's chia seeds and flax seeds. The seafoods, the fats from our seafoods, are they okay to use? Because we mentioned omega-3 earlier.
That's right. So that's why you would see a lot of the seafoods there, because the omega-3 fatty acids. Now, if you remember, even growing up, and now we use cod liver oil.
Uh-huh.
What is cod?
Yeah, saltfish. Right, yes.
It's not saltfish, but it's a fish.
Well, I mean,
right?
That's what we call it.
But we have
Cod fish. But cod is a fish.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
But some of the fish, and not just cod, but we have also tuna, which we've had a lot of on the market, especially in the earlier stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. We had a lot of tuna on the market, and that is some of our healthy fatty fish. We say mackerel, but we're talking fresh mackerel, not the canned mackerel so much. The canned mackerel will have it, but the canned mackerel will also come with salt, which we addressed earlier.
Right.
Your sardines, you will have some in your sardines as well as your flax seeds. And flax seeds, you can add it to your bread. You can add it to bakes. If you're making a roast bake, you can add it there. Sometimes I like the seeds because it kind of makes the whatever you're making look good, but I also like to blend it a little bit so that I can get what is inside the seeds.
Okay.
Because I have the tendency of feeling that you would pass out some of the seeds, but if we pass out a corn grain, more than likely we'll pass out several flaxseed grains.
Right.
So we can we can utilize some of that as well in whatever we make it. If we're making smoothies, we can add a little bit to it. So there are different ways. There's also flax oil that you can add to just about anything. You can put it on your salad. I mean, you can put it, if you make some oatmeal, you can mix a little flaxseed oil into there. And some people might just take it like that if they're able to tolerate oil. I'm not able to tolerate oil like that.
Okay, great.
So they can do that.
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of time remaining, but let's go to a telephone line and take a quick call. Doctor and call, good evening.
Yes, good night, Godfrey.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, good night. I just want to ask a simple question. My favorite food, meat, but fish is not meat, but meat is not fish, but still, call it so. For a nice broth is the head of the tuna. Usually, if I'm making a fish broth, I make grate a coconut and get my little bit of yam, maybe one carrot, some lettuce, not lettuce, but some of the celery. Blend it, blend celery and onion and garlic together with like coconut milk and prepare a nice little thing. But I usually find myself enjoying the fish head, where there is multiple oils in it. What is your judgment on that?
Okay, thank you, Gola. The fish head, Mrs. Browne?
The fish head is actually very healthy. You're going to get some of your omega-3 fatty acids from that as well, particularly that you're using tuna. Fish head is a big head. I had one. I promised myself not to use it again because it was so hard to handle. But the tuna head, the tuna fish will have the omega-3 fatty acids. You will get some iron in there. You might get some zinc in there, even a little vitamin A in there. So, and some of those fish heads are really fatty. So you're really getting a good source of the omega-3 fatty acids. No problem with using your fish head.
Okay, wonderful. So I just want us to sort of just summarize, because very importantly, Doc, I'll let you take this one. Salts, sugar, fat. That combination in excess is not a good combination for us. Just put that into perspective quickly.
So whereas we need to eat to live, there must be balance in our lifestyle. Balance in our behaviors as per how much we consume, as per our need. What we do otherwise, do we exercise, right? But also recognizing that there are limits to everything that we will consume. We have to recognize that all of these components, all of these foods, fat, sugar, and what's that one?
Salt.
For some reason, they all contributed conditions that we really have been struggling against. I listened to the obituaries tonight, and with all due respect to the people whose families are listening to this, and I listen to the amount of people who are dying prematurely, it bothers me intensely because we know that there is a lot of chronic disease, non-communicable chronic disease, and it's often as a result of our nutritional behavior. Oh, my grandmother used to eat this. Your grandmother used to walk to church, and your grandmother used to go in the river and wash her clothes and put a basin on her and spend the whole day joking on the stone, right? And your grandfather went up in the land early in the morning, right? And he didn't buy artificial foods. He ate healthy food that he grew. So even if he might have eaten a lot, it wouldn't be as much. And then, of course, probably grandfather couldn't afford to buy all the meat. Mrs. Browne mentioned that we eat a lot more meat because the truth is we probably can't afford to eat a little more than our parents. There are people who don't have it. Let's not forget that. And even if people don't have it, are even greater risk. Because guess what? They're getting all the crap in the supermarket. They're getting the foods that are unhealthy, right? And that puts them at greater risk of being even sicker, because that's what they fed their children from small. That thing that I hate, the ramen thing, like I was telling you earlier. Some girls were upset with me today because I was telling them that it has all the salt they need in a day in one packet, and they tell me that they just beg that the price gone up.
The price haven't gone up.
I asked them why would they want to eat salted cardboard? Because that's what it appeals to me. I can't. There's no nutritional value to it, right? And our children go on that. And I see parents who gave their children a bowl of ramen, and they eat and they drink all this, and that's 5 grams of salt or more than the nutritional value, right? So that is going to encourage them to have hypertension early. But everything is interrelated, right? We're asked to maintain levels simply because if one doesn't get you sick, another one will get you sick. And if one gets you sick, the other one will make you worse. Because like I said earlier, if you already have high blood pressure and diabetes, consuming cholesterol is going to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you already have high cholesterol, you're at risk for getting, because the cholesterol will get into your arteries, make them hard, and cause you to have hypertension. So you get into this vicious cycle of poor health. They really are bad friends on a path if we do not contain. Right? They come like 3 bad John. You kind of stop them and cool all of them before you come into your space where you eat. It is important, and I tell everybody this mighty teacher that you use only for WhatsApp and calling and gossip, all the information is here. All the information is on the internet. We go in and we see. You look at Healthline, you say?
Yes.
We need to go there and look for information that's going to make us healthy. Take half hour every day. And instead of watching the foolishness and all the stupid TikTok videos and all the foolishness, I think if everyone takes half hour to inform themselves as to how do I live to eat, how do I eat, or how do I behave so that I can live longer and healthier, right? What is it about carbohydrates that are going to make me overweight or make me sick or make me fat? What is it about salt that's not good for me? What is it? What is it about the fats? I know tonight people are probably confused because we spoke about polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, saturated, unsaturated fats, and then we talk about cholesterol and we talk about omega fats. It's confusing, but just get there. Okay, get on the internet and look for information. It's all there. We hope, again, you probably have seen that there is front of package labeling, just inciting people's curiosity and the understanding and advocating for us for a better kind of life. Hopefully next week you'll see ads on TV and all social media. Take a little time to watch it, because you will see what we are proposing is the introduction in the Caribbean of front of package labeling. In other words, there's warning labels. There's warning labels, a black label saying high in salt, high in sugar, high in fats, right? And mostly the fats will probably will be saturated, unsaturated fats, right? Saturated fats, right? And we know that if you can contain that and you give your children less of that, because the snacks that come in those packets have the fats, have all the salt, have too much sugar or too much carbohydrate, right? And our children are starting to get sick from very small because that's what we buy for them, right? So 2 things: go and get the information, understand the different stuff, and please listen to that advocacy campaign. Let's understand why is it that we need to have reminders when we go to the shop, because most of us shop in the supermarket anyway. If we're not shopping in the supermarket, it's because eating yam and food in the yard and mango and plum and tam and all those things, okay? So let's educate ourselves. Let's empower ourselves for better life. There's a lot more of this that we need to learn. We need to learn in our schools, we need to learn in our churches, we need to learn in our homes, we need to learn wherever. But I'm going to ask you to just pay a little heed to that campaign that's coming, the Cancer Society, because we know that obesity and those challenges cause cancer, and the Chronic Disease Commission are really the partners that are dealing with it. And we probably have a couple other partners. But please, I'm going to ask you to pay attention to that, because although we said a lot, there is just so much more to learn. And people have to stop defending themselves, because ain't nobody out there fighting for you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nixon. Mrs. Browne, 30 seconds to make your closing remarks.
Yes, I'm going to make my closing remarks by saying that in speaking of the internet, were areas that you can look for some valuable information that would be simplified. WebMD is a good site, as well as the Mayo Clinic. And then, of course, there are other schools like the Harvard University, and so that is more research type oriented documents. But I also want to say that the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council has some web-based sessions that we will be doing throughout the course of the year. Look for us, look at our Facebook page, Grenada GFNC Council, our Facebook page. You will see when it's being announced. You can also call the council at 440-2126 and find out when we're having our next session. We just had one this month. We also have micro videos that we're going to be putting out. So take a look. You may learn something. Or if you get confused about something, you can always call us to clarify. We are here to serve the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Moine.
Thank you so very much. And Mrs. Browne, let me just let you know that we'll be more than happy in the program to pass that information out to the public when you're having those sessions, because I would like to be part of them as well. I would like to hear, what is happening at the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council. And what's the number there again if people would like to contact you?
440-2126, 2126. We're in St. George's, so we're 440.
Okay, wonderful. Well, ladies, I thank you so very much. It's been wonderful. I've been listening to you all, and I'm thinking here, how can I get them to come back next week? But I wasn't able to come up with anything yet. But I'm sure before long, I will find a way to get you all back on the program together. It was such a joy, dealing with this area. Some discussion, sugar, salt, and tonight fats. And of course, Dr. Nixon just summarizing that, and showing us how, if we don't pay attention to what we're doing, we can harm ourselves, just by using some of the things that we think, we really love. So moderation, as our guest said, is very important. And of course, the information, it's so important. And you heard a couple, WebMD, I'm very familiar with that site, the Mayo Clinic, I'm also very familiar with that Healthline I mentioned, and there's so much more, and they're very, very easy to access. Google has the answers, so just go on there, you would find the information.
PAHO and WHO will also have lots of information.
Oh, definitely.
Language for people
definitely so. So
and beware of the dogs.
Yes. So go to the sites, credible sites. Go to the sources, get the information. I guarantee you to do you a whole lot of good. And of course, continue listening to our program. We will do our best to try to pass our information to you as best we can. So thank you once again, Mrs. Browne. Thank you, Dr. Nixon. It was such a pleasure. And we will be talking very soon again. Enjoy your Easter weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know
Mrs. And please take the salt out of the mackerel.
Right.
And let us remember the main reason for Easter is the rising of our Son, of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's not all about the food and the kite.
Definitely so. Mrs. Browne, I forbid you to look for any barbecue pork tails this weekend. Maybe the following one. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. That's our program this week. You can join us next Tuesday for another live Doctor on Call. Until tomorrow, please God, I'll be back with you from 6 tomorrow. Release it Wednesday. We have a great one lined up for you. So until then, do have a good night and all the best.